Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for TNP's HR Check-In with Laguzza of the Works Consulting. Our topic today, time to return to work, how the coronavirus could change your workplace. We so appreciate you joining us today. TNP exists to build the capacity of organizations so you can make positive change in the community. And we're so appreciative for the sponsorship from the Josephine S. Gumbiner Foundation to continue TNP's ability to offer these programs to you for free during this time. I wanted to thank also Ann Laguzza for continuing to offer your expertise, for remaining a point of contact for our organizations as we continue to navigate our changing dynamics here. And just want to thank all of you, those of you who are continuing to work on the front lines as essential workers. Thank you so much. We hope that you are safe and that you are well. And for those of us who are hunker down, following the safer at home orders, but most of us, a lot of us still working. Thank you for what you continue to do for all of our communities, and stay safe as well. And for those who are sort of in the kind of waiting mode and trying to figure out what's going to be happening in the next couple weeks and months, that's part of why we're here today, is to figure out maybe a little bit of a game plan on how hopefully we can re-engage in our work as safe as possible. So just want to say, for those of you who aren't aware, we do have a couple of webinars coming up. Next week, we are featuring a webinar on how to really help understand, I should say, how you can help your clients, help your staff navigate through some of what's happened from through a trauma-informed lens. So we're very, very happy to have a licensed clinical social worker with the Guidance Center, Nate Swearingen, I believe I had that name correctly, joining us for that webinar next week. And so you can log in or go to tnpsocal.org to register for that webinar. And then the following week, we will also have a webinar with Jan Masaoka of Cal Nonprofits, and she's going to be discussing some of the findings from the Causes Count survey, as well as discussing what organizations can expect in the next coming months and even beyond in terms of what our landscape is going to be looking at. So some really great information coming your way. We continue to try to bring things that are relevant to what's happening right now, and information that you will need as you re-engage your communities. If there's anything that you can think of, any topics that you can think of that you would really like to see us cover, please send us an email, info@tnpsocal.org. You can also message us on any of our social media. You see our social media platforms there, whether you find us on Instagram or LinkedIn or on Facebook. We'd appreciate you engaging us with us there. So without further ado, I wanted to again thank Ann and toss it over to you, and I'll be in the background, but if you need anything, you just let me know.
Okay, I'll call you out. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I think I saw most of your names look really familiar, but I always just like to make sure you know who I am. I'm Ann Laguzza with the Works Consulting. I have been in human resources and leadership development for 29 years, and the last 19 years I've owned the Works Consulting. We are excited to celebrate 20 years in 2021, and hopefully we will be able to actually have a group together by then. That'd be amazing, because we'd love to have a big party to celebrate. We've been doing these check-ins every week, trying to stay ahead of topics. And what I love is when we picked these topics in advance, and then it was so interesting because this week already I started to get a lot of notices about, oh, returning people to work, and what do you need to know? And I thought, oh, perfect. We're right on trend, which is what we're trying to do. If you do ever have any suggestions, we're open to it. I have another idea for next week, which I haven't run by Christina yet, but I will. We'll see if that one is, we'll figure that out. But if you also have anything you want to suggest, please do. So today our check-in is time to return to work, how the coronavirus could change your workplace. And I think we probably should say will change your workplace, but it depends, because a lot of you have different situations. And so the degree at which your workplace might change could be very different. I usually present for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then I leave the rest of the time for Q&A. So the entire time I'm talking, feel free to put your questions up in the question box, and I will get to those at the end, and you can put those in anytime, feel free. And then we just go from there, and I'll just answer whatever questions you all have, and then we'll just move forward. So I think one of the big questions, that I am continuing to get from people right now is, will there ever be a business as usual again? And I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. I think that there are like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of information coming out this week and next week about returning to work. We still have a lot of uncertain things answered. Even yesterday, I was at the city council meeting. I think it was the economic workforce development meeting. And even they were saying, is it 6 feet or is it going to be a 4 feet social distance? So nothing's been completely set in stone, but we do have some guidelines. And I think that you can get lost in all the details. So what I would highly recommend to you is you pick maybe 2 or 3 trusted resources, attend those webinars or read their white papers, and then maybe confer with your counterparts here, your colleagues, and try to have some discussion about what they're doing. And that may even be something the partnership does at some point, who knows. But we know there's a lot of information out there. So when I decided to come up with this webinar, and when Christina and I talked, there are just so many things that we could have talked about, and we could have really, I think I could have probably I put together a week program. I mean, I just recently saw a checklist, which I'm not able to yet make public, but I will share as soon as I'm allowed to. Someone sent it to me. But I mean, I think it was almost 6 or 7 pages long of things that you could consider to return to work. It gets a little overwhelming. So I just want you to, I guess I want to remind you to just breathe through this process also, as much as we went through to try to get our workforces remote and figure out what we were going to do during this time. We're going to have a similar transition back. It's going to feel overwhelming at times, and there's a lot of information, but again, we're going to make it. There's going to be guidance on what you have to do. And then there will be a lot of things that you're going to just need to think about. And that's kind of what I'm trying to open your mind to today. Or what are some of the things maybe you haven't started thinking about that you want to start thinking about? And then, as I mentioned, of course, we will do questions at the end. So the first thing I wanted to suggest is that, just want to make sure that's quiet. The first thing I wanted to suggest is that you create a committee. I'll be honest, many of my for-profit clients right now have already started the planning process of returning to people to work, but my nonprofit clients haven't started thinking about it yet. And again, doesn't mean anything. It's just, I've just noticed this trend. And that's one of the reasons I said we better start talking about this. So you absolutely should put together a committee. I realize that's going to vary depending on your organization's size. It may include some board members, but if you could do kind of a cross section of people, that would be great. And the purpose is really to start identifying potential concerns, maybe raising questions that employees have, so that you can start to make a plan. I don't know that personally for me that I would expect this committee to solve all the issues, because you may need experts that are outside your organization. You may need someone inside your organization that's a particular expert in that area, or maybe has a passion about that can help you. So I think though that you should have a committee that's starting to look at the various issues that are coming up. And like I said, it's not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to be the people that determine everything, because that can put a lot of pressure on them. But I want to make sure they're brainstorming and thinking. And it may even help to do a mental walkthrough of what a day looks like in your office. Walk through it from, if you do have clients or customers or whatever you call them coming in, walk through what it looks like as a mail delivery person. Walk through as an employee, right? A board member, the different people, a volunteer, who are the different people that are going to, and I say walk through your organization, that's the building. That's, if you have another, for right now, we're trying to get people back to the building. So you may have another, different office that you need to talk about. So that might help, is sort of like, okay, I'm a volunteer. I come to the front door. What does that look like? So getting a committee together is definitely helpful during this time to get the thoughts going. So I wanted to talk about 6 readiness essentials. As I mentioned, I probably could have gone over 100 readiness essentials, but I thought these were some of the main areas. And again, I have plenty of time for questions at the end, so you guys can ask me if there's something that I'm not touching on as we go through. So one of them is prepare the physical location. So a lot of us left our offices in rather a quick pace, maybe, it might not have been overnight, but it was rather quick. And we need to think about what condition is the office in now. what's the cleaning plan going to be before people get there? What kind of inspections are we going to do of the work environment before? We may need to walk through at some point to determine what type of social distancing measures we need to put in place. But we want to remember that we may have left an environment that now has been sitting there for a while, and it hasn't had a lot of attention. So what do we need to do to get it prepared for people to come back to it? Another readiness essential is prepare the workforce. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but there is anxiety. So we want to try to work through that. I know I've already started hearing from a lot of employees. Many of my clients are starting to call people back slowly but surely, and even calling them back for some remote work. And they are getting faced with people who are declining to return for a variety of reasons. So even at a remote, in a remote setting. So you might want to start thinking about that. You need to have policies in place or a procedure in place for deciding who's going to return, when they're going to return. You know, are you going to do rotating shifts? Are you going to, you know, are some people going to stay remote? Some people going to return to the workplace? How are we going to communicate with everyone? Are we going to do a Zoom meeting every time? Are we going to have some things written down? You know, what's going to be the process? So preparation of the workforce, I think, is going to be a big one. And it might present a few more challenges than you have thought of, but we are going to talk about those a little more. Control access. So you're going to have to come up with protocols for safety and health checks if you're going to do anything like that. I know there's a lot, and I have a question later about thermometer reading. What about the reception areas, both for your building? By the way, if you're in a building, so you're in a like I'm in a high-rise building and I have my office. So I have to think about my office, but I'm also thinking about my building because I'm going to have employees now that are going to be coming into an elevator, sharing an elevator. What does that process look like? I don't have a ton of control over the elevator because it's not my building, but I do want to give my employees some guidance. Visitor policies, and then shipping and receiving, which we're going to talk a little more about. But what is that access going to look like? Are you going to allow access right away? Are you going to have very limited access? What are your expectations of those people coming to your building? Do you expect them to have masks? Do you expect them to, you know, like I said, if they're allowed to come at all? So really thinking through those things. Number 4 on this list is create a social distancing plan. We've got to decrease density. We're going to have to look at common areas like break rooms, conference rooms, and determine how many people can actually be in there at a time. Do we need to put tape down on the ground to distance people from the microwave? I do want to mention that one of my clients, they're an essential business, and they had closed the break room down because they just felt that they couldn't control the number of employees that were accessing it. And in fact, in California, you have to have a place for employees to heat their food and to keep their food cold. That law has not changed to date. So it doesn't mean you have to have a break room, but you would have to have those things available. So I said, well, if you're going to close down the break room, you're going to have to put microwaves somewhere else for people to use and a refrigerator somewhere else for people to use, because if they can't go in the break room, you have to figure that out. I have another client who's considering removing all furniture from their break room for a temporary time, just to really discourage people from hanging out in there. So it's something to think about. What's the schedule going to be, which I mentioned a little bit earlier? What are the office traffic patterns? You know, I know a lot of offices are starting to think of, are we going to have a one-way hallway, you know, one way going one way going another way? Also, how does the flow normally work in the office? And really thinking about all of that and all of sort of the areas that people can have a difficult time distancing themselves the way they should be, and what can we do to help that? Another readiness essential is to reduce touch points and increase cleaning. So I know there's a lot of organizations that are looking at what doors can we keep open now that maybe we normally were closed. Are we going to require like all office doors remain open just to avoid that extra touch point? What's the desk cleaning policy? How are you going to, you know, what kind of cleaning supplies are you going to provide? And are you going to require your employees to clean at certain intervals during the day? Are you going to have someone else do that? What's the food plan in terms of, again, like looking at if the break room, things like that, cleaning common areas, shared tools and equipment. I mean, here's something, you guys, that I was talking to an attorney about yesterday. And I mean, this is where I said you could really go down a rabbit hole. I was thinking about a refrigerator. And I was thinking in a workplace, and I was thinking about me bringing my food in a plastic container and putting it into the refrigerator, and then someone else coming and wanting to put their food in, and maybe my container's in the way, and they just innocently put their hand in and move the food over. So there's a touch point. So there's things we're going to really have to think about, and it's a lot. And so that's why I say, don't get overwhelmed. Maybe start with the big stuff, and then we'll drill down to the small stuff. And also know that I think more guidance will be coming. We're just trying to get ahead of the plan. So we're not waiting to the last minute and then crossing every single bridge. You may make a list of things, like my client with the break room right now, they really don't know what they're going to do. And that might just be on their list of, we don't have an answer for this right now. We know we have to solve it, but it's staying over here on the kind of in the parking lot area of, we'll get back to this. And then communicate for confidence. You're going to know that you need to recognize that there's going to be fear for some people in returning. We're going to want to communicate as transparently as we can, really listen and be serving our employees. And you're going to need to probably do some ongoing surveys. This does not need to be complicated. I don't want you to complicate it. I don't want you to hire a consultant to do a 20-point survey. It's very simple. I'm going to give you a few questions you can ask, and you can make it very simple, but you're going to want to do check-ins with your teams specifically around these matters to make sure that they're feeling comfortable. So reducing workforce anxiety, like I said, is probably one of the, if not the most important aspect of returning to work, and the readiness of the workforce physically, emotionally, and psychologically. You know, I think that leaders have so much responsibility right now. And I have this feeling that there is going to be this, added sort of expectation, not that you're a therapist, because you are not, or maybe some of you are, but you're not hired to provide therapy for your employees. But you are, it's like you're going to have to draw maybe from a new place that you haven't had to draw from before, where we really always separate work and personal. They've become very blended, and there's a lot that we're going to have to address that we maybe have never come across before as leaders. So develop a plan to reduce those employee fears and concerns. Should be a top priority. You're going to want to be letting them know exactly what you're doing, how you're doing it, and addressing what their concerns are. Employees must feel that their organizations care about them, right? And I talk about this all the time, no matter what we're talking about. It's so important for the employees that they feel valued, that you care about them, that you understand how to improve and advance care during this, their return to the workplace. They're really going to be leaning on you, those of you leaders out there, they're looking to you to give them some sense of calm and peace. And if you're feeling any sense of anxiety about it, they will definitely feel that as well. So anything you can do to minimize your anxiety will help them. And then obtain direct feedback from your employees. A lot of times we are feeling like we have to have the answer for everything. And 9 times out of 10, if we would just ask for some help from some other people, we'd get some other ideas. So you some help, especially when you're not sure, you've tried to solve it in the best way possible, and maybe it involves a few people in particular, and you want to ask them, definitely do that. I wanted to just mention something in terms of this anxiety. The other day I was talking to a leader that I work with, and she said, this is going to sound crazy, but when this is all over, I think I need a vacation. And I said, it doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds completely realistic, and I understand, like, we are going through so much right now. There are so many additional demands on our time, both personally and professionally. And even though nothing was ever certain, I know a lot of people talk about, oh, it's so uncertain. I was like, well, life has never been certain for us, but this really reinforced that for so many people. So that's just to remind you that some of you may be feeling that out there right now, that the people are feeling wonderful, that the idea that we're going to maybe get back to some normal life soon, hopefully. But there's also people who are feeling fatigued and tired after all of this as well. So we're going to have to keep that in the front of our mind. So when I talked about surveying employees, I know I did this with my team, and I have several leaders I work with doing with their teams, and they're getting some great feedback. We came up with 3 simple questions. You can ask whatever you're comfortable asking, but this starts the conversation, right? So when you think about returning to the workplace, what are you excited about, right? And there's lots of people excited. What are you concerned about? And what do you have questions about? And this will help you, this will help you back to that committee we talked about. This will help you start to think about Okay, what do we need to do to get people back? Here's what people are excited about. They're excited about the people interaction and seeing their friends again, and maybe even the familiarity of their desk, and that they know they're familiar and it's a perfect place to work instead of maybe the kitchen table. And then what are they concerned about, right? Well, we just, redesigned the office to have an open floor plan. How is that going to work? There's no way I'm 6 feet, away from the person next to me and there's no protection at all. And what do you have questions about? Gosh, I'm wondering, are we all coming back at the same time? Am I going to have, the same shift? They're going to have questions like that. So ask those questions. I recommend that you send it out in an email first. Tell them it's coming. Send it out in an email first. Give them time to think through. So maybe give them a 24-hour period or so to think through. Ask them if they would send it back to you in advance before you meet with them, so that they'll have time to have given the response. You'll have time to have looked at them and kind of formulated your additional questions back to them, and then have a meeting with that person. I do recommend doing these individually first, because the concerns and the questions may be a little personal. And then from there, you can decide if it's appropriate to bring some of the concerns and questions, or even the excitement, which I love, to a team environment. And that way everyone can kind of hear globally what people are concerned about. So maybe it'll trigger something else for them, or maybe it was something they were afraid to say because they didn't want to bring it up and someone else brought it up. And you can do that in a more anonymous kind of way instead of, Anne said this specifically. So do it individually first. So if you've never been through a change management process, you are getting a crash course in it, because this entire situation is all about change management. We've been doing nothing but change it feels like, for the last 7 or 8 weeks, from, not being able to go into our regular work environments to potentially either furloughing or laying off people, having remote workforces, figuring out how to get everybody to work from home. Christina and I were joking about how to operate Zoom at the beginning, all of this. We have been doing nothing but change, and we're just going to keep that cycle going. So I wanted to give you some sort of tips to help you through that process. The communication, you've noticed, I think I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times now, just in this presentation alone. Keeping employees informed of all of your plans as soon as appropriate. Somebody told me that they had an employer that was trying to keep people so informed that it was almost anxiety producing in and of itself, because it was almost like, okay, we're going to be able to go to the office next week. Okay, no, we're not going to be able to go to the office. Okay, 3 of us will be able to go. Oh, no, no one will be able to go. And so the employees actually gave the leaders feedback that said, listen, we appreciate that you are trying to be on top of this, and we want you to be on top of it, but it's causing us anxiety, too much, it's almost too much information. So maybe maybe you got to gather it for a week and then let us know, or unless something is absolutely set in stone, obviously let us know. And that's really helped the workforce a lot. They feel much calmer now. So definitely communicate, but also remember that maybe they don't need to always know everything if there's a lot of flux, because it can cause more anxiety. You're going to need to conduct some training, you guys. You're going to have new policies. You're going to have cleaning expectations. You're going to talk about changes in the shared space procedures, occupancy. Remember those break rooms, those conference rooms, any other shared environments you have, the waiting room. So start those trainings as soon as you can. You don't need to wait for everybody to come back to do the training. Do it now. If you can. I mean, as soon as you go through this process, as soon as you have it, start talking to them now. This is not going to be a one-time shot of everyone clean your desk every day before you leave, and you're never going to have to talk about it again. You're going to have to talk about it again. And then you're going to need a plan for reinforced training. The day one that they show back up to the office, there's going to need to be training. And then periodically, there's going to need to be training again and reminders. You can certainly use signs and visuals to help people. There's all kinds of really I want to say innovative solutions coming up for visual cues in the office. I don't know that all of them are going to be necessarily affordable, but very, very innovative. Some of the things I've seen. So this is going to need to be a process, though. It's not a one-time shot. I wanted to mention too about this section is that, some employees are going to expect that nothing's going to change. And then others are going to assume everything will be different. And what happens when everything, because sometimes people go, oh, those people will be my favorite because at least they'll be prepared for things to change, right? But one of the things that happens when someone thinks everything is going to be different is that you might find some challenges because they've thrown out everything, literally, all your policies and procedures, and they think everything's new. So you're going to have to do some reminders of, hey, guys, certain things still are in place. Yes, we do have some changes related to COVID-19, but yes, we're still following these basic policies and procedures. You're going to need to do some education around that too. Connect the changes to your vision and mission. I'm going to tell you, this is probably going to be one of the hardest things, I think, for many organizations to do. I know, nonprofits in general are very, you really pride yourself on being a welcoming environment for the most part and making people feel comfortable. Putting up, a barrier between me and my coworker doesn't always feel so welcoming, but you're gonna have to learn how to kind of connect that. Get your employees involved in the why so they understand that and they're more likely to support it. And again, the good news is that we're all going through this. I think people are expecting there to be some changes, but you are going to have some pushback, and you're going to have some people who feel that it's unnecessary, perhaps, the measures that you're taking. So be prepared for that. But there's a whole level of change management here that you guys have to deal with. And like I said, if you've never really been through a significant change process, you're going through it. You're going through one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. So you're definitely going to have some new policies and procedures. This is by no means meant to be an all-inclusive list, but you're going to first have return to work policies, or perhaps they'll even be called procedures. Who's coming back to work, when, who's staying remote, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. If you're going to have anybody, what are your guest and visitor policies? Okay, what are they? Do you have participants that you have to have come in? What are those rules going to be? What are your policies for those temporary employees, if you have any, your volunteers, your interns, etc.? If you have employee travel at all, whether it be driving travel or flying travel, what are those policies going to be? When are they going to be allowed to travel? What are the new rules? I know a lot of organizations that put a lot of people in one car, right? It's like, we're doing it. We're going to a workshop down in LA. Am's going to drive and she can fit 4 other people in her car. It saves on mileage reimbursement, builds some camaraderie. Well, that's going to be a little more difficult now, right? So what is that going to look like? When employees should return to work, policies related to work from home environments. So if you're going to continue to allow people to work from home, many of you sort of quickly put together a plan, maybe a policy or procedure. Do you want to revisit that? Do you need to start thinking more long-term now what that looks like? And then employee work safety policy, of course, and guidelines for the prevention of the virus transfer. I mean, that obviously is going to be a big one on everybody's list. And these are just a place for you to start. Okay, so why return to work? People are really thinking like, why would I bring everybody back? And then maybe would I keep some people or everyone remote? Well, why would you bring people back? These are just some things to think about. There are a lot of people that feel that there's an increased productivity at work. They have fewer distractions at work than they do at home. They feel that it's like an innovative place. They get that benefit from rapid decision-making, right? When we're together, like, oh, I just saw you in the hall and hey, I just wanted to ask you a quick question, something I had on my mind, and we can quickly do some brainstorming. It works a lot faster than me having to call you or text you or whatever. And it does streamline communication a lot of times. For the physical work and required equipment is another reason, right? I actually need to come to work to have access to, whether it be the data, the clients, the information. I can't not realistically, but maybe it's not as effective to do my work remotely. Or I may literally need to buy some sort of equipment. And then to maintain a secure environment related to data. I mean, I know there's been a lot of relaxing of policies and security, but it's not an ideal long-term solution. And then of course, for the people and the place, you get to be around your leaders, your team, your peers, clients, whatever your name is, your participants, for those people. And it is a social outlet. I'm sure we're all having some great conversations at home and, with people we're getting to Zoom with, but it sure is nice, to see people in the office and have some social time. So then why do they stay home? Well, you might be considering, right? Like who should stay home? And maybe it would be better if they stay home. Well, it might be because they're more productive at home. Maybe it really is easier for them to work remotely. Maybe they have a long commute time and you're actually getting more effectiveness and efficiency out of them because they don't have to deal with that. Their focus is easier, reduce the commute time, individual health and personal situations. Some people, so we're understanding that when we are allowed to return to work at this point anyway, it's not saying that the virus is gone. What they're hoping is that there's less risk for us. And so, but there are still people that have health risks. And it might even be just anxiety. They might be having additional health risks with long commutes, being away from home, and their own personal health. They might still not have childcare or elder care options. I'm hearing more and more, and I know some of you on this call even are starting to open, the early childhood centers are starting to open, and that's so exciting, but some people are not going to have the options. So they're not going to be able to come back even when you want them to come back. Even if they want to come back, they might not be able to. And then they might have a desire to reduce the environmental footprint. I know a lot of people are really intrigued by this opportunity to work from home, and they're wondering, if that might be something that they could do long-term that really is benefiting them and the environment and that kind of thing. So I think you're gonna hear a lot of discussion about this from your employees as well, and you wanna really give this some thought as you're making these decisions on when, who, all of that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some responses you might hear, because I'm already starting to hear these and working through them with my client. And I just wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about that and see, and we can talk a little more when we get to the questions too. So you might say, okay, great, yay, you can come back to work, here's your date. And somebody says, well, I can't return to work, right? They say, you know what, I'm still at risk. Right? My doctors recommended I don't come back yet. There's other people in my household that are at risk, and I'm concerned if I'm coming to and from work and around others that I'm going to then potentially bring that to my home. And I don't have care for my child or for a senior person that I'm taking care of in my home. I don't have care. So I don't know if I can return to work. Then there's I don't want to return to work, which I've heard this more times than you might realize at this point. Remote work is effective. I really like it. Why do I have to come back to work? I'm actually doing better, or almost like a prove to me that I'm not doing as good as I was in the office. They also, I actually have had some employees are receiving funding through unemployment and other sources that exceeds their regular compensation right now. So they don't want to come back to work yet. They're like, wow, I'm actually kind of doing better on this unemployment route right now than I am coming back. I have a client right now that was able to, they were able to carve out some additional work remotely. And they had originally laid off all their employees, and they've been able to bring back some work, which is very exciting. I think that's great when I hear people are starting to move in the positive direction from work. But they've had that comment already made is, wow, I don't know, to come back for a few hours. I don't know. I kind of, my unemployment's really taking care of me right now. And so I think I'm good. So you're going to have to be prepared for that. And then I'm just afraid to return to work. No medical reason, just generalized fear. So none of the other reasons up there, just, I'm just afraid. Like, what if someone's sick, or I share an office with 2 other people and I'm just scared of that, or this person got sick like 3 or 4 times last year without the coronavirus, what does that mean to me? So you're going to hear those things, and you're going to need to start to prepare responses. And here's the thing I want you all to think about. You're going to need to figure out what your responses are going to be, and you're going to need to make sure you're applying them consistently. And I want to just remind you of that, because whether they're a high performer or a low performer prior to this incident or currently, you're going to need to come up with what the plan is. Now, that's not to say that you could carve out remote work opportunities for people that almost like a benefit of exceeding expectations in work, but you're going to have done done a very good job of communicating those expectations and where people are meeting them and where they're falling right below. Because if you haven't communicated that, the person who doesn't get the opportunity is going to be confused, and they're going to say, well, how come I don't get the opportunity? So then you're going to need to be able to have a conversation with them about where they are performance wise and what you need to see from them before you would potentially open that up as an opportunity. And remember, there's a hybrid opportunity here too. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be 100% work remote or 100% in the office. If you're open to that, maybe there's a day or 2 a week, or maybe it's a month, that you offer some flexibility for people. Your documentation of your responses is going to be critical, regardless of what you come up with. So when you make offers of employment, returning people from layoff, you're going to absolutely want to have a document that recalls them and what their offer of employment is. You're actually rehiring them at that point. So you're going to want to give them an offer of employment, and you want to make sure at that point you have to do rehire forms. Certain forms you will have to do rehire: the 2810.5 form, the I-9, the W-4. There will be certain forms you have to do, but of course, whatever your policies and procedures are. Recall from furlough. So that's where you haven't laid them off, right? We just put them on furlough, but now we're bringing them back. You'll want documentation that you send to them, or if you verbally notify them first, you can give it to them when they get to work, but we're recalling you from furlough, and here's the position that we have available for you. You'll want to remind them what their sick and vacation accrual balances are that are reinstated. You will want to talk to them about, in both actually, the return from layoff and furlough, talk to them a little bit about safety and what you're doing for precautions. And you will want to make sure you've identified again in both situations when they'll be eligible for health benefits, if they're actually going to be meeting the health benefit requirement. Any unpaid time off for leaves. So if anyone's taking any kind of leave of absence, whether it be now or if they're going in the future because they can't come back to work because their children are still maybe don't have care and they can't work remotely, you're going to want to give them some time off or perhaps a leave. You're going to want to have that documented really well. So everything needs to be documented. I can't tell you there's a letter for everything that you're doing. Nothing should just be done verbal. And then declining recalls to work. So when you get those, so I just did a couple of these today, right? So we have an employer who's able to add back in some hours. We contacted everyone who was eligible, and we had a few people say, I don't think I want to come back right now, because it's not their full opportunity yet. It's not their full job. It's back to a partial work. So I don't want to come back right now. So that needs to be documented, because part of being eligible for certain benefits is being available and ready for work. And you just want to document from your side that you did offer some employment. You want to be clear on the hours you offered it and the date you offered it, and just that the employee voluntarily declined that opportunity at this time. It's very simple, just more of a document of record, and you would definitely send the letter to the employee, and you would keep one in their employee file. So it's really important to document everything you're doing with these employees, and you don't just leave it as a verbal discussion, as an email discussion, or a text discussion. You can have all of those, but you need to formalize it through a more formal documentation process. This is just very important for you as an employer, and it's very important for clarity with the employee. So there are some new potential roles related to safety. I would not expect you to have all of these, but I wanted to kind of lay out some things that I've been reading about, and just to give you some ideas of things to think about. And you may have one person that does all of them. You're going to have to decide how it works. And these are just kind of some names. You can come up with whatever names you want. But there might be some team captains, and they're organized by department or by location, and they're in charge of making sure that all those protocols are respected and the precautions. You will have people, I guarantee you, say, it's okay if I take my mask off, right? So if you require a mask from like an external person, say myself, I come into your office and I'm sitting in someone's cubicle and I'm like, boy, this thing's really uncomfortable. I can take it off, right? People are going to have to be comfortable enough to say, no, you can't, actually, because that's one of our rules right now, is that anyone that doesn't work with us every day has to wear a mask. So you're gonna need help. So we're gonna need to know who is doing that. And these people or person, whoever's selected, would maintain open line of communication with supervisors, who can also help reinforce reminders of things that they're seeing and what's going on. PPE and training experts, who's gonna maintain the knowledge of how the personal protective equipment is used, whatever you're providing. Maybe you don't have a lot, but whatever you're providing, maintain the quantities. They're in charge of stock. They're in charge of where they're located. They're probably even in charge of disseminating that equipment to employees. So how is that working? I love this, quarantine coordinators. They're designated to respond to anyone exhibiting symptoms. So I have to be honest, I hadn't even thought about this. And of course you need somebody or people who are aware of if someone starts to exhibit symptoms. How are we notifying any medical support? Are we going to get them transportation either home or if it's an emergency situation. And then what about, do you need a quarantine area for this person? Because if they're sitting at their desks or not feeling well, do you just let them sit there if you have to call emergency personnel? Or do you, maybe move others out of the area? So I want you to be thinking about all of that. Okay. So then delivery handling. So here's another thing, is how are you handling the delivery of, sorry, you guys, I'm just trying to turn this off. There we go. How do you handle delivery of receipts? I'm sorry, delivery and receiving, I guess, of all information that needs to be sanitized. So mail, right? Because there's a certain amount of time that the actual paper carries the virus, from what we understand. Boxes, deliveries, right? I have a client, it's a nonprofit, and one of their sort of perks that they do is employees can get things delivered to their work environment, because they're not always home. So it's great. You order a computer, you need somebody to sign for it, it's great. It could come to work. You order a gift, as a surprise for somebody, you can have it come to work. Well, they're gonna have to rethink that, because all of that has to now be sanitized. How is it getting sanitized? Do they want additional packages in the workplace to what they're already offering, or they're already ordering? So just some things to think about. Again, it's not to say you don't need all of these. You may just have one person that does all of them. I think the supervisory team is going to need to stick together, but I will tell you, you need to designate people. This could be part of your committee focus. Train them on what their role is. And maybe one of the most important things is to make sure everybody else knows, because if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm breaking some social distancing rule, or I don't have my gloves on there, or whatever I'm supposed to have, and someone comes by, especially if it's not a supervisor and it's a colleague, and says, oh, hey, Ann, you've got to get your gloves on. I don't like that, right? I don't want direction from this person. So we're going to need to make sure that they know everyone knows this is what their role is, and they may ask you to comply, and you need to treat that direction as serious as you would if it was the top level of the organization talking to you. When I teach harassment prevention, I talk a lot about, I think it's everybody's responsibility to make sure the environment remains harassment free. And I also feel very similarly about this. I think it is everyone's responsibility to keep the environment safe and take the necessary precautions, but people are going to make mistakes, or they're going to stretch, push the boundaries a little bit. And we need help to make sure that there's enforcement. We can't just turn it over to everybody. So then there's some short-term employee considerations that I wanted you to keep in mind. It's important to keep employees engaged and protect their well-being. And this is, as they're coming back to work, we want to keep them engaged. You want to keep an eye on if anybody's performance is dropping, if they're not looking like they feel comfortable. You're just really going to need to be extra. There's that thing called management by walking around, which you're walking around and looking at people and, interacting with them. That's a better word. Sorry about that. And you're going to want to do that. This is going to be a very important time. The first few weeks back easily is going to be a time that the supervisors are going to need to be out from behind their desks. We're going to need to be greeting people in the morning. We're going to need to be checking on things. We're going to need to be coming up with ways to keep people engaged and excited. We want the teams to still have healthy interactions. We don't want it to feel like they can't talk to each other. And we're going to want them to collaborate. Now, this might mean that we all sit at our desks and do Zoom now. I mean, that is a possibility. We may not all be able to gather into the conference room anymore with appropriate social distancing. And that may just be one of the new realities. So it doesn't mean we can't still gather together. We just might have new ways to gather together. It might mean that if you bring food into the office, you're not going to bring a box of donuts where everyone's grabbing their own donut. You may have to get donuts packaged individually, or if you get something healthier than a donut. But you might need to think about those kinds of things now, and that everybody can still participate, but we're not going to, bring in food that people are all touching, and even as careful as we are, it's going to make someone else feel uncomfortable. So now, in terms of what's going on with the long term, because I really only talk about short term for just a minute here, is nobody really knows quite yet what that long term is going to look like, right? We're just at this point trying to get through the short term aspect. And it will reveal itself, where there is more to come, and we will start to figure out what long-term looks like and how things are going. But if you focus somewhat on the short term now, that the rest of it will come. I also wanted to mention, I think it's good to keep the focus on the positive, because employees, and we're going to talk about the work culture, employees can You know, some employees can get so focused on how things aren't anymore and the negative and the bad, and especially depending on how many external influences they have that are just giving them negative information right now. So it's going to be really important that we try to focus on the positive. And this really leads us right into kind of creating that continuity of your work culture. You know, we talked at the last webinar about, and I asked you if you could define your work culture. And I hope some of you actually could and or worked on that sort of activity by yourself to figure out if you could define it. So you're going to need to be very clear. What is our work culture? Like before all this happened, how would you define it? Now that's the work culture we want to keep, I'm assuming. So now what do we do to keep that and still have precautions in place to make sure people feel safe and welcome back in the environment, and maybe have some people still working remotely and whatever all the other changes are that you have, you know? So this might be another team you put together of some employees, you know, with supervisors on, let's talk about the work culture. Let's have regular meetings about it so we can keep on top of it and know when it's not feeling the way we want it to feel, and what could we do to make changes to that? Where have we maybe not explored some ideas that it's not 100% to how it was, but it's closer that way than to something completely unrecognizable. And things are definitely going to be different, but they're not going, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be worse. I know, you know, I've certainly, you guys see me every week. I love interacting with people. It is not my favorite thing when I do have to go out and I can't hug people and I'm, you know, got my mask on and you can't really see my facial expressions, and it is different, but I'm already getting used to it, right? We've been, you know, dealing with that now for a while, and I understand we're all doing it. So it doesn't mean things will necessarily be worse. They're just going to be different. And we don't know how long they're going to be different, but they're going to be different for a while. So my last slide I want to go over with you, and then I'm open to take your questions, is I just wanted to give you a few of my Hey Ann questions. And Hey Ann, by the way, just came out of the fact that that's how most people ask me questions. They're like, hey Ann, I have a question for you. And the marketing company that I work with actually heard that on multiple occasions through speaking engagements, et cetera, and just said, okay, this is your hashtag, right? Hey Ann, because that's how everybody begins every conversation with you. And really is funny, that's what people say. So a few that I've heard this week already, and I just want to share with you. Can my workers' compensation broker help with resources? 1,000%. If you have not already reached out to your workers' comp broker, please do so. Ask them. I know many of them have great resources, great signage. They're helping rewrite injury and illness prevention plans. They have all kinds of tips. There's a lot of great resources out there. So reach out to your broker and find out what they can do to help you. Should we get an EAP plan? So an EAP plan is an employee assistance plan. It was very, very popular because it provides, among many things, but it provides a component of mental health services for all your employees, whether they're enrolled in health benefits or not. So your employees that are enrolled in medical benefits have access to mental health care most likely, but then you have other employees, you have volunteers, et cetera, who do not, potentially with you. And so it might be beneficial. They are not usually very expensive. They're completely anonymous. I know some people love them, don't love them. They often have really great resources on their website. So you can actually get one-on-one treatment. You can pay for that, where they can actually see a provider or talk to a provider. And you can also, there's also a portal like with a ton of information in there. It might be worth at least calling your insurance broker and having that conversation. Do we have it? If you don't know if you have it, do we have it? How much would it cost for us to get it? What if we just got it? Could we even get it right now, you know, mid-year, which I think you will be able to. How long, you know, do we need to buy it for a year, et cetera? And then if you do have one, start promoting it now. Start reminding people of what it is. And one of the ways I find the best way to promote it is I go into the portal and I find a topic that's interesting. There's, like I said, there's so many great things on there. And then I find a topic, and you could bring that to one of your meetings that you're doing. Is you could say, well, guys, you know, I went onto the, you know, EAP plan website and I pulled up this resource, and it's about tips for, you know, working in a small space with a significant other or another person or something like that. And you could do something like talk about that. They have all kinds of great resources. I'm hearing a lot about temperature taking. Are we required to do that? Today, you are not required to do that. Might that be coming that we have to take people's temperatures? Potentially. There are definitely a lot of pros and cons. I just want to say a couple of things is, your temperature isn't the only symptom of COVID-19, but I do understand that there are some benefits to that, to knowing that. There are a lot of rules because we still have HIPAA in place, and there are a lot of rules about how you manage that data. If you do have employees, if you do take their temperature and they sign in every day that they got their temperature taken, how long you're able to keep that information if it doesn't indicate that they have any high fever. So there are definitely some rules around it. And there's also the time involved. It can't just be like I come to work and my coworker just takes my temperature. You've got to have a policy in place and a procedure. Who's standing at the door? Who's taking temperatures? If your workforce comes at staggered times, how do we get their temperature taken? Because you wouldn't want, let's say I come in at 10, a lot of other people come in at 8. You don't want me to come into the office, walk all around the office trying to find the person who's supposed to take my temperature, have them take my temperature and find out that I've got a high fever. Because now I've just walked all around the office, probably put my stuff down on my desk, touched my desk, all of that. So these are some things to think about. I think in terms of some of the things I'm hearing, I think there's a balance between what's required and then what's optional, and maybe some things that you think you might want to do. So I figure what's required, we want to know what those are to the best of our ability right now. And then looking at what's still optional. And from that list, are any of those things that you're thinking, I think we might want to do that. Like that, I think would be good for our workplace. And then starting to learn more about it and how you would do it. And then some of the things on the other list, you just might wait until they're actually required. And you'll have time to get it implemented, I think. I mean, trust me, everybody will be in the same boat if you wait until it's required. So that answers my next question. I jumped ahead. So should we wait until certain precautions are required before we implement them? And then do we need to revise our employee handbook? So I know you guys know I work with a lot of attorneys, really good employment attorneys on a regular basis. I'm hearing some of them say revise the handbook. I'm hearing others say, write appropriate policies, maybe just keep it as part of the employee handbook until the end of the year. A lot of these things that we're dealing with, we anticipate will change by December. And if they don't, if emergency paid sick leave continues or expanded family medical leave continues, we could always add that into the handbook then. But I think potentially the cost and the time, and a lot of you have to have your board approve your employee handbook, to go through that right now you might be better suited putting all that energy into something else right now, but you may want to write down the policies and just keep it as a separate document for right now. They could sign for it as part of their return to work, as part of their hire package. When you start hiring people again, it would just be a separate document. And then just note, January, let's revisit. And if we still have some of these things are still present and available to people when we revise the handbook, doing everything else, we'll revise the handbook. But I'm not an attorney, so I have to say that attorneys may feel differently, but that's kind of my sense on that right now. As we know, everything's up to right now. So with that, I am open for your questions. I'm gonna move my stuff here really quick. Sorry that I had some beeping going on. I couldn't tell which phone it was, but it was this one that I couldn't quite switch off while we were talking. Okay, so I'm gonna go up and grab your questions, and if you have any, please feel free to type them in there. There is some time. Yes, okay, so the first question was about the presentation. We always get asked about this. The partnership is amazing. They will make it available to you. Please be patient. They are uploading so many different presentations, but it will be available. It is on, it'll be on their website, I think, and they'll connect it to their YouTube. Christina will address that again, but yes, you will have them. Would you be able to send us examples of policies that we can implement? Gosh, Christina, I have not written them all. I am just now starting to have clients call and ask us to start writing policies. So I'm at the beginning of this with all of you. We are just starting to write policies. I mean, we just really finalized a really good EPSL and EFMLA form to request that time off. I think we finalized it. I'm actually considering making that available, the generic sort of version of it, because some of my clients have a customized version. I'm considering making that available to everybody. If I do, I'll do that through my social channels. I would say that it will probably be in the next week or so if I do that, so keep an eye out for that. But right now I am writing policies as quickly as possible, as quickly as people need them. Oh, thank you, Richard. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate all that lovely feedback so much. I appreciate all of you all for being here. It's so great. For a nonprofit with just 7 employees, creating these teams committees seems like it might be tricky. Any suggestions? Yes, it absolutely will be tricky. So I feel for you small groups. So I'm all of 3 employees, including myself. And I can't tell you how many things I've already thought of that we need to do when we go back to our office that seem unbelievable, but we have to do them for the safety of my employees. So I've already started the conversations with my employees, what will make them feel comfortable. How do I get them to want to return to work, et cetera? They want to come back, thank goodness. But so I would just say you're going to look at your environment. You're going to come up with what solutions do you need, because every single organization, it's going to vary. It's going to vary what you need in terms of precautions. And then you're going to work with what you have in terms of 7 employees. But the precautions and safety are the same no matter how many employees we have, right? We have to put them in place. You're just going to, maybe it might even be easier to get it, to manage it, is what I'm hoping when it's a smaller group of people. I'm in the middle of a handbook update. Should I wait to publish until we know more about the actual policies that may come up out of return to work? Oh, that's a good question. Well, I don't know. I'm on the fence. I think it depends on I guess it depends on how old your current handbook is, because if you just updated it last year, you might be okay. But if it's several years old, then maybe you want to go ahead and just finish it and put it out. And then you could just do an update to the handbook, which should be relatively easy. Maybe you prepare, if your board has to approve it, you could prepare them that a quick update will be coming and they could just, approve the updated language. Like I said, so if it's pretty old or there's kind of a lot of things in there that have changed, I would say go ahead and move forward with it. If you feel like you can wait a little bit, I would definitely maybe try to hold on. Even if we could just hold on for like another month, I think a month, I'm hopeful that by June, we're going to have this even more and more dialed in, that we're getting more and more clear of what we're going to need to do. And, I know our stay-at-home orders here in Long Beach come up right now, May 18th. So I keep thinking in the next few weeks, we're going to get some more clarity. If we're an employee and our leadership hasn't started to have this conversation or have it with us, what tips would you recommend for managing up on this topic? I love that. I would pick whatever supervisor you are most comfortable with, whether it be yours or if it's someone else's. So whoever is a supervisor in the work environment you feel most comfortable. And now that you've come to this webinar, I feel like you have a perfect opportunity to open the discussion and say, oh my goodness, I just went to this webinar and there was a conversation going on that I don't even think I've heard anybody talk about. And I was kind of wondering what our plans are. And maybe you could even offer to be part of that solution. Like, could I start taking on some of this? Would it be okay, if I could participate? So I absolutely would start bringing it up, because I know a lot of people, I felt like last week, a lot of people got frozen. I mean, I'll tell you, I had more phone calls of people telling me they were just exhausted last week and they were just like, done. I mean, somebody said it so best, so well, or said it best. She said, I'm moving so fast and so slow all at the same time. And she said, and I'm like, I totally get that. So I'm hoping that this next week, people will start to have some movement, but bring it up for sure. And I would go to the supervisor I feel most comfortable with, that I think that also could be influential and help open that discussion. Do you think we need to develop a document that a staff member signs every day when they come and that states they're free from any COVID-19 symptoms? So you can do that, but there are going to be some rules about the document. I'm glad you brought that up, because here is one thing I wanted to mention. When you're recalling and bringing people back, one of your conversations on the phone with them should be, are you now experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19? And have you been in contact with anyone who was exposed to or experiencing the symptoms of COVID-19 within the last 14 days, I would say 14 days or less. And then if they say yes, ask them what day. So, so you can then put like a self-quarantine period, unless they provide a doctor's note. So, and then obviously if they've been exposed, are you experiencing any symptoms? Have you been exposed to anyone? Yeah. Have you been around anyone who's been exposed or experiencing symptoms? So the document you could, I think, again, logistically, It's going to be different for everybody. You know, some of my nonprofit clients have 100 employees. I don't know if they're going to be able to manage a sign-in every single day. I don't know how they're going to do that. But if you feel you can manage it, but it's going to have to be confidential, separate documents. And I also think you can't retain them for very long. There's a limited retention time. And I would have to actually look that up. They're just starting to address that in terms of the temperature taking. Great question. Do you know anything about the law they are trying to pass that employers must give laid off employees the opportunity to return to work before rehiring new staff? Well, so that has kind of always been around, and I have heard that that's going to be potentially reinforced a little more stringently, because some employers now are going, gosh, now I don't have all my low performers, right? And I can clean house and sort of start over again. Or I know some people have said I can hire people for less money and it'll be cheaper for me. So I do know that that's being talked about. It would not surprise me if it isn't something that comes up that says you have to offer them opportunities first, but I haven't heard that actually written out yet. I mean, as of right now, if you actually laid off people, you still have a right to hire back, you know, the people that you want to hire back, but there are some considerations. And I would say, you guys, if you laid off anybody right now and you're thinking about only bringing back some of them, absolutely consult with legal. You can start with a consultant, somebody like me. We'll do an initial pass, but you're going to want legal to look over it and say, okay, this makes sense and you're in good shape, because there will be some questions. My pleasure. Thank you. How should we handle an employee who refuses to return to work? Ask them to resign. Okay, so there's a couple of things. If an employee refuses to return to work, I'm trying to be show a little bit of compassion and empathy, and ask them, of course, try to understand what it is their fears are, and ask them if there's anything that I could do that would alleviate those fears. And if they say no, nothing, I'm just afraid, then I would depending, but most likely I'm gonna, and I just talked to an attorney about this also, we're gonna move to a place where we're just going to assume that they've resigned from their position. But I'm gonna give them a little time to think about things. I'm gonna put in writing that we've had a discussion, that we've offered them their position back, you know, same position as they left, when their benefits would be effective, all of that, and give them a date to let me know by if they're going to return to work. And then let them know if that we don't hear from them by that day, that we would assume voluntary resignation. So, and I think there are going to be some people who make that choice, either for safety reasons or just maybe they don't want to come back, and maybe they're rethinking, kind of recalibrating, as I like to say. At this point, is it mandatory or the law to require employees to wear masks? And do we provide to everyone? We have over 500 employees. So my understanding right now is you aren't required to require them to wear them at work for most situations. I don't know what kind of environment you have, but for most situations. However, it is optional for them to do so. And yes, employers need to provide the masks if they are required. So you'll have to make sure you get, and it's just cloth masks. It doesn't have to be an N95 or whatever it's called. But again, I don't know what environment you're in. I want to make sure I'm careful about that. Some of you are required to wear certain protective equipment. But as of today, it's not required that they wear them at their desk. But they will be needed to wear them in common areas. I mean, so think about this. So we have an office, right? When my employees get up though to go to the restroom, they're in a common area now. We share an office suite with a bunch of people. So I'm providing masks and gloves for them for all those areas. Because I know that now they're going to be touching door handles and things that I don't have any control over, right? We can keep our office as clean as we can keep it, but the minute they leave my office space, I don't have any control anymore. So it's something to think about. And I realize, Michelle Byerly and I from the Nonprofit Partnership were just talking the other day about the sheer expense of the PPE can really get overwhelming. We have a child development center. Do we require children to wear masks? This is going to be interesting. Great present. Oh, thank you. I don't remember. I do have a couple early childhood clients. I don't believe that children are required to wear masks, but I know some of them are on this call, so you can chime in and put that out there, and I can find out for you for sure. If you just email me after the presentation, I'm happy to, I'll find out what they're doing. As I recall, the children are not, unless the parents want them to. I work with a small organization who has a culture of flexibility. Sometimes this is not conducive to consistently implementing organization-wide guidelines or policies. What do you recommend? So I like this question because here's what's going to happen. So, you are going to have to reasonably consider all options. Options can be changing work schedules, right? Like you might not, if everybody right now works 8 to 5, that might not be what everyone can work. Maybe you're going to have a 7 to 4 and then a 12 to whatever, or something like that. And I know instantly our reaction is, oh no, we're not gonna be able to do that. But you're gonna have to brainstorm solutions, right? That's why the committee becomes so important. And then identify why you cannot, it would be unreasonable for you to provide that as an option for somebody. So for you to, I would say that it's great that you have flexibility, but you're going to have to be able to consistently implement guidelines. And I don't think you're going to be able to get around that. But if you can build a good case for it, document it, why you would be able to do that. And because people are going to be asking for different schedules. Like I said, they're going to be asking to stay at home. So that's for everybody, whatever you immediately resist. And I just had a client do this the other day because we talked to them about having, they have 150 employees and we're thinking about having 3 shifts. And they immediately said, there's no way we're gonna be able to do 3 shifts. And it's like, okay, but before we say no way, we need to walk through what that would look like. Would we need to hire more people? Would we need to hire security at night because they're not normally there after dark? What would it look like? And then we have to show that that's unreasonable financial burden or something like that. You can't just say, oh, no way, it would never work. You just can't do that with this kind of situation. Thanks for the ideas and things to think about. You're welcome. We're a team of 5, and if we return to the office and someone doesn't want to return, what kind of response is appropriate? So again, it goes back to those reasons. If it's just merely, I don't want to return and you don't want to offer them work from home opportunity, then they may just be voluntarily resigning from their position. And I'm feeling comfortable giving somebody a few days to think that through. I would have the verbal conversation. I would tell them how much we really want them back. I would ask if there was anything that they felt that we could do reasonably that would make them feel more comfortable returning, because it might be something simple that you can do. And then I would tell them that we're going to send them documentation that we've offered them their job back, that they are declining, and we're going to give them 5 days to think about it. And I just made up 5 days, you guys, it's not a law. You could come up with a different time that you think is reasonable. And then if they choose not to notify us by that time that they'd like to come back, then we'll just, we'll accept their resignation. And, you wish them well. And we just, I think there's going to be some people that choose not to come back. Okay. Can we require employees to be tested and receive negative results prior to return? Not that I'm aware of yet. You cannot. Because I don't even think that not that I'm aware of, but things keep changing. For a furloughed employee, the position was changing prior to the furlough. How do you recommend handling the new job description for the existing position? Okay, well, I hope you were having that conversation before they went on furlough. But if you didn't, you want to have that conversation. So when you recall them from furlough, you're going to make them an offer for the job that you have available to them with the description and everything. Because you said you were doing it prior to the furlough, I'm hoping there's notes or email communication, even if it's just between leadership or with HR or something like that, about the possible changes, so that, and not that you have to necessarily show that to the employee, but so that it's documented. So again, I'm trying to make sure it doesn't look like you were just making changes just because. Now you didn't mention if this was a positive change, so it could be a great opportunity, but you're just going to recall them. And when you recall them in writing, you're going to, or reinstate them, you're going to reinstate them offering the position that you have and what the description is. Oh, thank you, Carol. I appreciate you attending. We also work with kids. Can you please email everyone the answer about the kids and masks? Okay, we will do that through the partnership for sure. And Wendy, thank you. So those are all my questions. Thank you everyone for participating today. I really appreciate it. This means so much to me to be able to connect with you all. I put up on my Instagram stories yesterday. If you're connected with me on Instagram, please do. If you're not, I was saying that I was having so much trouble getting motivated putting this together, and it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. I love meeting with you all. It's that we have been turning around new content. This is probably the fastest I've ever turned around new content in my entire career, because we literally get off this phone call. Christina and I will brainstorm today. We'll figure out what it's going to look like for next week. And then I start doing research instantly and start trying to, get the latest current information. I reach out to the attorneys I work with, et cetera. So I love doing this. I'm so glad I have the opportunity to do it, but it was a lot yesterday. There's a lot out there. I could have talked to you about so many things. We could have gone down a whole rabbit hole of just, masks and things like that. So I appreciate you all very much. And with that, I will turn it back over to Christina.
And thank you so much. It is no joke. You all know how quickly the nonprofit sector can pivot and churn out everything. But in truth, really, Anne, thank you so much for keeping us well informed, and also just for bringing some calm to the chaos that is all of this. It really does help, and as evidenced by the many thank yous that are coming in through that Q&A. Thank you. I echo everyone, and you are amazing. And I thank you all also for showing some appreciation over for TNP. Our team is really looking to advocate on your behalf. And so as much resources as you need, let us know. This is what exactly we're designed to do, is to be responsive to your needs. So hopefully we're being responsible with that responsibility. Sounds weird, but hopefully we're meeting your needs right now, and we truly appreciate you for being here and joining us today. So, and thank you again. We will look forward to next week. We're going to start planning right after this. So, and I know that everybody is always anxious for both the video and also for the presentation. So I will start rendering this recording right now and hopefully get it up over the weekend so you can share out with anybody as well. And don't forget, for those next upcoming webinars, one, really how you can help your teams and your community as you reopen or re-engage, and helping them understand the impact that this has had, not just financially, but also emotionally, physically, mentally. So that next webinar will really look at things through a trauma-informed lens and how you can help everyone re-engage in an effective manner.
So great. I have to say, that is really, really good, you guys. So
we're really excited to bring this one on. This one we've been thinking about and planning for quite some time, and we're really, really excited to bring it on. And I did have a couple questions from a few different organizations. If there's a cap on how many people can join any particular webinar, if you would like your entire team to join, we would love your entire team to join. So, but just know that by registering, you will get a direct link for emailed over to you to view the videos. So even if all of your team members can't make it, you can share that video out, and we will certainly post it up as well on our social media as well as on our YouTube channel. And then don't forget, causes count in that following week, which is, I believe, will be May 14th, and I may have that day wrong, but I do think it's May 14th. And with Jan Masaoka to help share with our community some of the impact of, from last year's study, but also really advice for what we're seeing coming down the pike. So I'm really looking forward at bringing that information to you. And again, thank you to everybody that continues to work on those front lines. Everybody stay safe. We are getting through this together. We will see you all in person someday soon, but looking forward to seeing you virtually again this next week. So welcome to May. And and thank you, everybody, again. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe, everyone. And thank you again one more time to the Josephine S. Gumbiner Foundation for sponsoring all of our webinars and sponsoring these HR check-ins. They make this possible. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe, everyone. And we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.